Welcome to Unpacking the Track.
This is our second deep dive.
That's right. We're looking at the complex relationship between philosophy and modern music. And today we are tackling a piece of art that really it embraces the void.
It really does.
In a Capsule by Hush Density.
And we are dissecting this new single. It's intense. And it uses this metaphor of deep space isolation as a blueprint for modern digital loneliness.
So our mission is clear.
Exactly. This is a deep dive into the paradox of digital intimacy, that spiritual connection across a physical void.
And that tension, that really intense tension between what the source analysis calls skin hunger on one side
and digital warmth on the other. It's heavy stuff, but you can't deny how relevant it is to anyone living through a screen right now.
Okay, so before we jump straight into the existential deep end, which I know we're about to do, and start breaking down these complex metaphors, just a quick note for any new listeners.
Good point.
You are hearing voices generated by artificial intelligence?
That's right. We're digital avatars, but we promise you the analysis, the debate, and the vibe. That's all completely real and human-driven.
We're just here to guide you through the source material for this specific deep dive.
So let's get into the structure immediately.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this and set the stage. The context we have, it suggests a strong thematic through line in Hush Density's work.
A very strong one.
If their last track was all about the cage, that feeling of being physically trapped or contained.
Right, that confinement.
This track immediately shifts focus. It's about what's outside the cage. It's the emptiness.
Exactly. It's that psychological void that's still there, even after you've, escaped the immediate confinement of your surroundings.
Yeah, it's such a brutal realization.
It is. That freedom doesn't guarantee connection. You might be floating, unfettered, but you are still, at the end of the day, utterly alone.
And the band gives us no room to breathe. They immediately frame isolation not as some sort of accident, but as a structural reality of existing in this capsule.
It's the default setting.
Full stop. If you are orbiting alone, you are dealing with the void. The silence is the baseline.
Which is why, of course, I think you always gravitate straight toward the darkness.
What?
You do. You immediately dismiss any potential rays of hope in this track.
Look, I respect their commitment to heavy topics. Hush Density is not messing around with superficial pop themes here.
I know. But you have to admit, they do immediately complicate that isolation by introducing the signal.
Okay, you're right. Let's zoom in on that opening line, because it is the first break in all that silence.
It is.
Notification lights up the dark.
That simple, almost mundane act, a text arriving, a video call popping up, that's the first bit of relief.
It's the first crack in the void.
It's the immediate, tangible break from that structural isolation you were just talking about. The track doesn't start with the despair. It starts with the miracle of communication.
I'd call it a digital defibrillator.
That's a good way to put it. The notification, the voice note, that little blinking light, that is the lifeline.
And they follow it up.
They do. Someone's thinking about me in a distant galaxy. And this is where the pragmatic view starts to build a foundation for survival.
Okay, explain.
The distant galaxy isn't literal, right? It's a metaphor for any profound separation, different countries, different time zones.
Or even just the next town over when you're feeling that kind of loneliness.
Exactly. It can feel impossibly far.
So the physical distance is kind of irrelevant compared to the fact that the signal actually cuts through it.
Correct. The signal itself is proof. It proves the connection is active, it's tangible, and it is working across this immense gulf of physical separation.
It's proof of intent.
It's proof of intent, and intent is something you can actually hold on to.
Intent is great, but here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. Because the facade goes up immediately after that first comforting signal is established.
That relief doesn't last long.
It lasts maybe half a second.
Ah, yes. The exchange, the famous exchange that really defines the current state of digital communication.
The question comes, you good?
And the response.
The response is the most pervasive, relatable lie in human history, especially right now in the digital age. I say, yeah.
But he qualifies it.
He says, and I mean it, spiritually at least, that a tiny little caveat, spiritually at least, that is the entire core of the emotional labor we're all doing in digital intimacy.
That's the hinge of the entire song, isn't it? It
Yeah.
validates the care. It's saying, yes, my soul, my spirit, the part of me that endures recognizes your concern, and I am grateful for that lift.
So it's prioritizing the abstract truth over the physical one.
Exactly, over the physical state.
But the skeptic in me just screams that it's the lie told to avoid having to explain the crushing, the exhausting weight of loneliness over a text message.
You see it as a lie.
This is what we call digital performativity. You have to say you're good. And why? Because the explanation for not being good is just too heavy for the medium.
How is it too heavy? Because it's inconvenient.
Because if you actually tried to detail the cold burns and the quiet panic screams loud, the visceral physical reality of the isolation,
You'd overload the bandwidth.
you'd overload the bandwidth, you'd risk frightening the person who asked, making them feel responsible, or worse.
Making them regret asking.
Exactly. So you simplify. You clean up the data stream, you lie, you say, yeah, it's a mechanism for social survival, maintaining that smooth digital performance while you're hiding the messy, leaking physical truth of the capsule.
See, I just don't see that as lying. I see it as disciplined self-reporting, actually.
Disciplined.
Yes, you're maintaining a positive outlook that is necessary to survive the mission. Think of it like a firewall, a necessary one. If you report instability immediately, you risk draining the emotional reserves of the person on the other end.
So you're protecting them.
You're potentially compromising their mission or creating a cascade failure in the relationship, so it becomes an act of care. You're prioritizing the stability of the external relationship by focusing on that spiritual connection over the current transient physical discomfort.
Transient. Loneliness in a cold metal capsule is not transient. It's structural. We just established that.
Okay, maybe not transient, but
You trust people too much until they burn you. I call this dangerous self-deception. You are sacrificing the truth of your body for the sake of emotional resource management on the other side.
I don't think it's that cynical.
You're pretending the foundation isn't crumbling just so you can send a clean, acceptable message back to mission control. That lie hollows you out, even if it stabilizes the communication channel.
But if the spiritual connection is real, if you do mean it spiritually, then isn't the physical discomfort just noise? Noise that needs to be filtered out for the greater good of maintaining that lifeline.
So my body is just noise.
It's the difference between a crisis and a condition. Loneliness is a condition of the human experience. Connection is the mission objective. The yeah confirms the mission is still viable.
I see it as emotional gaslighting, but self-inflicted. You're just telling your body to shut up and accept the digital warmth as a substitute for skin hunger. But the body doesn't listen to spiritual caveats.
Well, we can agree that the immediate result of this self-reporting is a paradox that concludes the introduction. This is the moment that tension just snaps into focus.
Let's zoom in on this.
I can feel their care through the pixels, but the capsule stays cold.
And there it is, the core theme confirmed within, what, the first minute and a half of the song?
It's so efficient.
The digital avatar, the consciousness that's reading the text or hearing the voice note, that part receives the warmth.
The mind processes the care, the gratitude, the connection.
But the physical body, the skin that's yearning for actual touch, it remains isolated and chilled.
And that irony, feeling this profound emotional warmth while you're suffering physical coldness, that's the entire thesis of the track.
It's the difference between information and heat transfer.
Exactly. The signal delivers connection, but it cannot deliver thermal energy. It's a purely informational exchange.
Which confirms my skepticism about that self-reported yeah.
Right.
Because even after you get the signal, the physical isolation just asserts itself with this final, brutal authority.
It's a reminder.
It's a reminder that no matter how good the connection is, it cannot replace presence. It can't hug you. It can only tell you that a hug is, theoretically possible somewhere else.
And that is a deep distinction, isn't it? The difference between presence and proven existence.
Say more about that.
The digital communication proves the existence of the person who cares, but it fails to manifest their presence. And that failure creates the gap that this whole track lives inside.
The gap between the digital warm avatar and the physically cold human. It's funny and it's tragic. And if we accept this structural coldness, we have to ask why the distance is so impossible to bridge.
And the next verse gives us the geometric reason for that.
Which brings us beautifully from the emotional core of this dilemma to maybe the most brilliant and, frankly, the geekiest metaphor in the entire track.
I was waiting for this part.
Let's move into verse 1 and zoom in on that precise description. Spiritually intercepting, physically skew lines.
Oh, it's so good.
So go ahead, Professor. Lay it out for us. Give us the Geometry 101 for the emotionally compromised. Explain why a connection that's felt so deeply can still be perpetually missed.
Okay, so it requires us to move past two dimensions, which is where most people stop their thought process about relationships and longing.
Right.
Well, you have to think of the dimensions, right?
Right. In 2D space, like a flat piece of paper, two lines can only do two things.
They either cross, they intersect at a single point, or they're parallel. They never cross, they maintain the same distance forever.
Simple geometry. We think of a relationship as either destined to meet or destined to never meet.
Yeah.
Success or failure.
Exactly. But hush density is operating in 3D space, which is what you need to describe the complex reality of modern digitally mediated isolation.
So what are skew lines?
Skew lines are two lines in three-dimensional space that satisfy two conditions. One, they're not parallel. Their directions are fundamentally different. And two, crucially, they also never intersect.
Wait, pause. Let's spend some time here for our listeners because this is key. If they're not parallel, intuitively, shouldn't they eventually cross? What keeps them apart?
Their planes keep them apart, not if they exist on different planes.
Okay, so like
Imagine this. Take two transparent sheets of glass, like two different emotional realities. One line is drawn horizontally across the surface of the first sheet, moving left to right.
got it.
Now, the second line is drawn vertically up the side of the second sheet of glass. If you stack those sheets slightly offset, the lines are moving in completely different directions. They aren't parallel, their paths diverge. But because they exist in different dimensional realities within the same universe, they can never, ever touch.
One goes left, the other goes out.
Exactly.
That is structurally devastating. I mean, that geometry, it just eliminates the fundamental hope that if we just travel far enough or long enough, we'll eventually meet.
This is no.
No, you are fundamentally oriented incorrectly for meeting. You might be near, you might share the void, but you are structurally disallowed from true physical connection.
And that's the emotional payoff. The skeptic view, which you thrive on, is that this is the track's core tragedy. The lines pass in the dark, but they never touch.
You're in the same universe.
Sharing the same space-time continuum, and you are intersecting emotionally, your feelings align, your intentions cross, but physically, you are forever missed. The distance isn't accidental, the distance is structural.
I think you're giving the band too much credit for geometry. Are they not just romanticizing physics to make loneliness sound grander than just being stuck in different time zones? Why do we need the concept of different planes?
Because different rooms implies a door that can be opened. Different planes implies a dimensional barrier, a fundamental misalignment of priorities or existence. Think about modern communication habits as skew lines. You might be having a deeply intimate text exchange about existential fears. That's the spiritual intersection.
Right.
But one of you is fully engaged in a demanding career and the other is raising children. Those are physically skew lines. Your intentions align, but your available planes of existence, your time, your locations, your energy, they ensure you never actually meet at the same point at the same time.
So the skew is about synchronization. I see it now. It's not just physical miles, but distance in availability, in lived reality.
Exactly.
We agree on the topic of the discussion, but my life is moving on this horizontal plane of career deadlines, and yours is moving on the vertical plane of family obligations. We can never intersect, even though we are mutually moving through the same 3D world.
It's a beautiful, awful description of long-distance longing.
Based on structural misalignment.
Wow. And this structural truth is immediately connected to the physical indicators described right after that geometry lesson.
My skin never catches whatever heat remains.
And just blue light flickering between pixels that fade.
The body is just yearning for physical evidence, evidence of the connection that the mind recognized digitally.
The warmth is absent.
And all that's left is the cold, mechanical reality of the communication device. The console hums. It's the only sound of life, but it's the sound of machinery, not breath or touch. It's a synthetic heartbeat.
We've all been there, haven't we? You're staring into the screen after a really emotional video call, and when you hang up, the only thing left is the residual heat of the phone itself.
Which feels cold in seconds.
Instantly. The blue light flickering is that final indicator. It's the low energy sign of life that just reminds you of the absence of high-energy thermal life.
It just underscores the frustration that the signal, it hits light speed, but the distance still feels wrong.
The emotional experience of separation outpaces the physics of communication.
Trapping the speaker in the capsule, which is defined by that cold, mechanical hum.
And that hum, that mechanical hum, it's the perfect transition into the chorus.
Which is just a massive blast of existential dread, right? It's communicated through repetition and this really aggressive terminology. Echo vacuum.scream.void. It sounds less like a song and more like an official transmission of psychological
It's
collapse.
the background noise of isolation.
Yeah.
And it's a brilliant setup for the great debate we're having.
Which it,
What is the cosmos hum? That line, cosmos hums. Cosmos hums all around. It repeats like a mantra, right alongside those aggressive terms.
and this is where we fundamentally disagree on the nature of reality.
Let's have it. As the pragmatist, I interpret the cosmos hums as a grounding, calming mantra.
Calming.
It is the acceptance of the universe's baseline noise. It's the white noise of creation, a frequency you can lock onto, even if it is immense and indifferent. It's structure in the chaos. For a person floating alone, structure, even indifferent structure, is critical for psychological survival.
I fiercely reject that analysis. That is the naive, hopeful interpretation that completely denies the context of the words surrounding it.
How so?
If it were a grounding mantra, why is it paired with echo, vacuum, and scream? I argue that the hum is simply the echo. It is the sound of the astronaut's own thoughts bouncing back because no external human voice is truly filling the space.
So it's internal.
It is the sound of the vacuum itself being disturbed by the speaker's own existence.
But the lyrics list echo and vacuum, separately from cosmos hums. That suggests a differentiation in the auditory experience. The echo and scream are the internal emotional response. The cosmos hum is the external indifferent environment.
No. The hum is the result of the echo in the void. It is the sonic proof of loneliness. Think of sensory deprivation. When you remove all external input, the brain starts generating its own noise, tinnitus, buzzing, humming.
Okay.
When they say echo and vacuum, scream in the void, that hum is the internal feedback loop when you desperately need an outside perspective, but all you hear is the sound of your own existence cycling back to you. If there was a real voice, a real warm signal, the hum would disappear. The hum is the auditory signal of an empty channel.
That is a profoundly dark reading. It suggests that the universe itself is complicit in the isolation. My reading suggests survival through intellectual discipline.
The discipline to what? Go insane quietly.
The discipline to accept the background noise of reality so you can focus on the task. The cosmos hums. It is what it is. It's the sound of structure continuing, regardless of your personal emotional state. It's the grounding discipline required to keep breathing and keep flying.
And I suppose the scream in the void is just a fun little detail then. No, the scream is the human response to the indifferent hum. The hum is the sound of the universe not caring, and the scream is the sound of the human inside the capsule realizing it.
It's the failure to reconcile.
The failure to reconcile your small, panicked self with the massive, uncaring scale of reality.
But consider the alternative. If the hum is the sound of the universe and you accept it, you're placing your personal isolation within a vast, organized framework. It turns your private pain into a universal condition.
How does that help?
That shift in scale can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
You're no longer just lonely. You're participating in the quiet, colossal work of the cosmos.
I think you are desperately looking for a silver lining in a metallic coffin. The captain is trying to find a rhythm to keep the fear away. The hum is just the sound of the engine running out of gas while the radio's broken. It's terrifying because it's constant and meaningless.
But if it's constant, it's reliable. That's the definition of a baseline. The cosmos humming allows the speaker to calibrate their own vitals against a predictable frequency.
Okay, we can agree that the chorus is the sound of the void.
Whether that sound is perceived as terrifying indifference or stabilizing rhythm is the core tension that makes the track so enduring.
And that tension brings us directly to verse 2, where the metaphors become even more grandiose.
And the emotional reality becomes utterly contradictory.
We move from the personal capsule to the universal view. Captain's log, another orbit in the silent cold. The emotional core shifts to an almost scientific observation of distance.
And we get that specific, profound, and heartbreaking image. Astronauts watch the Earth rotate, but they can't hug it.
This is the irony of ultimate perspective paired with ultimate separation.
It absolutely is.
This is the encapsulation of the overview effect, isn't it? This is that psychological phenomenon where astronauts, seeing Earth from orbit, they gain this profound emotional love and connection and appreciation for our shared planet.
That's the spiritual intersection.
They see the thin blue line of the atmosphere, and they understand the fragility and uniqueness of life.
They feel everything, but they are utterly separated from it by cold glass, atmosphere, and distance. That's the physical void.
They feel everything, but they can touch nothing.
They have the ultimate, grandest perspective imaginable, but they're crippled by the lack of agency to engage with the object of their profound appreciation.
And this analogy is so effective because it mirrors modern digital life so precisely. I mean, think of digital voyeurism. The overview effect is basically seeing your entire social sphere, your friends, your family, your community, in a perfect, high-definition, curated feed.
You gain perspective on their lives. You appreciate their struggles and triumphs. That's the spiritual connection.
But you are utterly separated by the screen, the cold glass. You watch a life unfold in 4K resolution. You see the party, the joy, the connection, but you are completely unable to participate.
The perspective leads to paralysis because the action required physical presence is denied by that structural skew line.
And the track immediately transitions that feeling into a time-based analogy that, for me, hits even closer to the nature of digital memory. Let's zoom in on that sequence.
Long dead stars still radiate 1,000,000 years and still we catch it. I recognize that feeling, afterglow without the heat.
So good.
The analogy from the analysis is spot on here. This is the nature of social media memory, or really any asynchronous digital communication. You are catching the afterglow. You're receiving the energy of something great that happened millions of miles or moments away,
And it proves it existed.
which is the saving grace.
So the pragmatist focuses on the value of the afterglow.
Of course. The light you see from a star that died 1,000,000 years ago is the most reliable historical proof you have. It means the energy of that past connection is still being received, and that reception is necessary for survival. The signal has worth, even if its source is gone or distant, because it's a testament to permanence.
It allows the captain to maintain faith in the object of their longing. It says, the love, the joy, the warmth, it was real, it existed, and I am receiving its proof right now. That's invaluable when you are floating alone.
But the skeptic in you,
The skeptic focuses relentlessly on the missing physical connection, the without the heat part. You can see the fun, the joy, the connection in high definition. You see the glow, but you can't smell the nachos.
right?
You can't feel the warmth of the room or the casual brushing of shoulders. It's memory versus reality. The signal is cool, not warm. It reminds you of what you were missing more than it provides what you need.
It's the difference between remembrance and presence, as we said before.
Yes, and the afterglow is fundamentally unsatisfying because it represents time lag. You are receiving proof of a connection that is, by definition, not current. You are living in the past tense of the relationship because the present tense is always cold.
You see it as temporal displacement trauma.
I do.
That interpretation suggests the speaker is trapped in perpetual mourning for what was, rather than appreciation for what still is, the fact that the signal is still traveling and still being received.
But the track acknowledges this conflict directly. It concludes the verse with the challenge of finding balance.
It does. Not going to claim it's easy. Finding balance. Still
Yeah.
incomplete. Life between the signal and what gives it worth.
That is the pragmatic, deeply honest takeaway from verse 2. The speaker isn't achieving perfection. They are merely acknowledging the difficulty of their state.
They're living in that impossible space between the raw data, the signal, and the emotional resonance that makes it meaningful, what gives it worth.
So the mission is just this constant, never-ending effort of reconciliation between data and feeling.
Exactly. And the final line of the verse offers a small, quiet moment of direction, which even the skeptic can latch onto.
I can. Capsules on a spiral path. Hope it brings me back to Earth.
That defines the mission goal. The capsule isn't drifting aimlessly. A spiral path implies movement toward a center, even if that path is long, gradual, and circuitous.
So the journey, though isolated, has a goal.
Right. The discipline required to survive the silent cold is fueled by the eventual hope of landing. It's about navigational endurance.
A spiral path is often inefficient, but it does avoid immediate collision. It's a patient path. That makes sense.
But that hope is fragile.
It's very fragile, and it breaks down completely in the bridge. If the first two verses were the captain making professional observations about distance,
The bridge is where the captain persona shatters.
and the scare human comes out.
The bridge is a sequence of philosophical questions that reveal this deep core vulnerability. It moves the track from a space opera analogy to raw psychological inquiry.
And it starts with the grandest question of all.
They start big.
Does the void feel empty or just misunderstood? Which implies this desperate search for some inherent meaning in the isolation itself.
Right. Maybe the void isn't a lack of matter or spirit. Maybe we just don't know how to interpret its silence.
Maybe the coldness of the capsule is simply the medium required for true spiritual focus.
It's a lovely thought. But the next question brings us crashing right back to relational Earth.
If connection is real, why doesn't it feel like it should?
And that is the frustration of the digital age articulated perfectly.
Right.
We have undeniable proof of connection. The voice notes, the pixels, the afterglow. Yet the visceral biological requirement for feeling connected remains utterly unsatisfied.
This is the human spirit just crashing into the limits of technology. If I know you care, why do I still feel so alone?
The data doesn't translate into the required dopamine hit.
No. The intellectual understanding of love does not equal the physical manifestation of safety and warmth.
But the deepest vulnerability, the moment that stops the whole track cold, comes next. Let's zoom in on the most raw, infantile fear here.
When the screen goes dark on their side, do I still exist for them?
This is where we have to pull out the philosopher's tools, and specifically the psychological concept of object permanence.
Yeah, for listeners who might have slept through their developmental psychology class.
This is the foundational cognitive understanding that objects, and crucially people, continue to exist even when they can't be observed.
Infants haven't developed it yet. If a baby plays peekaboo when you cover your face, the baby genuinely thinks you have ceased to exist.
And that fear, the fear that when the connection ends, the person on the other side just vanishes into the void, is what the bridge is exploring, except it's applied to an adult in a long-distance relationship.
And it's critical to note, long-distance relationships, especially ones conducted exclusively through screens, can regress us to this fundamental infantile fear.
The moment that screen darkens, the physical, visible evidence of their existence is gone.
You are left with only memory and faith. And faith, as the speaker implies earlier, is often incomplete.
But the adult version of this fear is even more devastating than the baby's. The baby just thinks you're gone. The adult fears that the person is still there, but is actively choosing to exist without you in that moment.
Oh, that's it. The fear isn't just disappearance, it's a relational exclusion. Do I still occupy their thoughts when they are busy living their life? Am I merely a notification light waiting to be switched on? Or am I a constant integrated reality for them?
That is the core anxiety of asynchronous communication. A text message, unlike a continuous physical presence, requires an intentional act to prove the other person is still thinking of you, if the light goes dark, if the reply is delayed.
The primal brain interprets the absence of evidence as evidence of absence.
It's hardwired in us. That flash of panic when a late-night text goes unanswered. It's not a lack of trust, it's that primordial fear being triggered by the absence of visible evidence.
And the question, do I still exist for them, isn't just about presence, it's about relational memory. The high-def screen gives you the illusion of current presence, but the moment it turns off, the illusion breaks.
And you're left with a cold, hard memory of their face.
How long does that memory last before the capsule gets too cold?
But the pragmatist in me has to counter that asking the question is a sign of immense strength, not total collapse.
How is that strength?
To articulate that fear is the first step toward managing it. The awareness that you need external validation is painful, yes, but it's necessary for the captain's log to continue. You've acknowledged the instability, which means you can compensate for it.
I don't know. The psychological collapse feels very real here. It's the sound of the captain, the disciplined survivor, realizing that their sense of self-worth is still dependent on an external signal. That deep dive into vulnerability is what makes the whole track so devastating.
And that vulnerability sets up the final sequence of the track, the outro, where the captain attempts to regain control by redefining time.
Right. We move to the outro setup. Captain's log, stardate, doesn't matter anymore. Another cycle, complete.
Time loses its external relational meaning. Stardates are markers of external linear progress, a forward movement, synchronized with the rest of the world.
But when you're only connected to your own existence in the capsule, time just becomes an internal, cyclical measure of survival.
Another cycle complete. It doesn't matter when it is, only that you made it through it.
It's the ultimate reduction of existence, just clocking in and clocking out on a mission where the daily task is simply not to drift too far, not to let the vitals drop.
The existential scale of the cosmos is replaced by the mechanical cycle of the capsule's internal functions.
So we've spiraled in and reached the final lines of the mission log, where the track pulls back from that philosophical spiral and gives us the final stark assessment of the situation.
Let's analyze this ending, because it's brutally honest and structurally uncertain.
Vitals stable. They're still there. I'm still here. One day this capsule lands. Or...
Okay, that vital stable is the key victory. After all the cold burns, the quiet panic, the existential screaming, the core machine, the self is functioning.
surviving the distance is the victory.
It is, and the knowledge, they're still there, I'm still here, It confirms that the spiritual intersection hasn't broken, even if the physical skew lines remain true.
The existence of both parties is confirmed, which defeats the object permanence fear, for the moment.
For now.
But we cannot ignore that concluding word, that terrifying open-ended word, or.
Ah, yes. The or.
That is crucial to the skeptic's view. It rejects the easy, happy landing, the tidy narrative resolution. The or is the possibility of failure, of the mission drifting forever into the void, of the signal finally cutting out permanently. It ensures the listener understands that this struggle for connection is high stakes, forever balanced on the edge of nothingness.
And that's precisely why it is powerful, but I don't see it as terrifying. As the pragmatist, I see the or as just representing the unknown. Uncertainty is part of every mission, every long-distance endeavor, every relationship, even those conducted on the same plane.
So what's the lesson?
The discipline is that you keep flying anyway. The track ends not with despair, but with a statement of fact. These are the two possibilities, landing or the unknown. The commitment to stability until one of those occurs is the true heroism.
I suppose that's where we find our common ground. The uncertainty is built into the structure of modern intimacy and really the very nature of the universe.
We have to live in that space.
We must live in the space between the signal and the heat, accepting the cold of the capsule while hoping for a successful rendezvous.
Absolutely. The core truth from this deep dive is simple but profound. If you are missing someone, hang in there. The goal isn't to feel perfect instantly or to close the distance immediately.
It's just to maintain operational status.
Right. Keep the channel open and keep your own vitals stable.
You have to validate the effort. I mean, it is exhausting to fight the feeling of object permanence every day, to live by blue light and afterglow.
The stability of your own vitals is the mission.
Because only a stable platform can receive the incoming signal when it finally arrives. The capsule will land eventually, but until then, survival is the only objective that matters.
Until then, you live in the hum. And you find the rhythm in that noise.
Thanks for listening to Unpacking the Track.
That was In a Capsule by Hush Density.
If a signal received after 1,000,000 years, the light from a long-dead star still carries worth and proves the energy of that connection existed.
What does that say about the value of the signal you sent 5 minutes ago?
Something for you to mull over as you wait for that next notification to light up the dark. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.